It is a pleasure to take a call on part 2 of the State Sector and Public Finance Reform Bill. And this is the part, of course, that does amend the Public Finance Act, and therefore the part of the bill that I think does need a large amount of scrutiny, because in amending the Public Finance Act, this is the part where the way that the government's budget is structured is being altered. And there are often very good reasons why the way budgets are structured can be altered, and I think that some of them are inherent in the changes that this bill brings about. But we do need to be cautious, Mr Chair, because this is often a way, in changing the way budgets are structured, that governments can actually create a bit of a smokescreen so that it's difficult to compare from year to year about what's happening with the expenditure. So it is right and it is proper to give a lot of scrutiny and debate and discussion to this particular part of this Act. And I know that, Mr Hayes agrees with that, because he obviously shares the concerns that I've raised. So an example that I would give for anyone listening to this debate is, for example, in vote ACC, in the ACC area, between 2008 and 2012, if we look at the budget documents the way they're currently constructed, we can see that in the area of funding for injury prevention in ACC that there's been something in the order of a 42% decline over those 4 years in the funding for injury prevention. I know it's shocking, because it's actually over a period of time in which workplace deaths have been increasing, and which a time in which there's been real concern around what's been happening in that area. But, Mr Chair, I want to bring it back to using that as an example of why it's important that there is some consistency between the way the budget is constructed from year to year, because when it is constructed in a similar way, we can actually track that through, and we can see that the injury prevention funding has been cut by 42% over the course of 4 years. However, when the way in which the budget is constructed, as per the changes being proposed here in this part of the Act, when that occurs, it does sometimes make it difficult to actually compare apples with apples. That is, to say the way that the appropriation was brought down in 2008, for example, is a direct comparison with the way in which it was constructed and brought down in 2012. So that would be, I guess, the question that I would pose to the Minister, to be able to explain to the House how these changes will be able to still allow comparisons between years in terms of what's happening with those estimates, so that we can be sure of how the money's being moved around. Mr Chair, one of the changes that's been proposed in this part of the bill is a way in which the estimates can change, so that it makes it clear that other departments, as well as the one administering a particular appropriation, can incur expenses against that appropriation. And again, the example that I just used, I think, is really relevant to this part of the Act and this particular amendment, because in the instance where there was a rapid decline in the appropriation for injury prevention spending from ACC, there was a corresponding rise in spending on injury prevention in a different department, under the Department of Labour, or what's become known as MOBI. So this particular change would allow some transparency around the shifting of money. That's how I read this particular amendment. And it would therefore make it clear that even though there had been a huge around 42% decrease in funding in injury prevention in one area, and just, I think, about a 15% increase in the other area, you would be able to put those together, I think, using this amendment, and see that overall there had been still, nonetheless, a substantial decrease across those two appropriations of funding in the injury prevention area. So I think that this will create better transparency. It will make it easier to see.
The Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to take a call on part 2